This episode of the Bloody Vegans podcast is brought to you by Veg1 and the good folks over at the Vegan Society. Veg1 is the multivitamin and mineral supplement designed by vegans for vegans. It was introduced back in 2005, updated in 2021 with an incredible new plastic-free package, and contains all of those key vitamins and minerals that everyone will tell you when you transition into a plant-based diet, into a vegan lifestyle, that you need to think about, and you absolutely do. So, what's in there? You've got B2, B6, B12, D3, iodine, selenium, and folic acid. So all of those kind of key ones you need to consider when you're starting out, or perhaps you've been here for some time. And it's all in a convenient once-a-day chewable form, which is super helpful, right? It's just £12.70 for 6 months worth, and they come in two amazing flavours. You've got orange and you've also got blackcurrant. Orange is a personal favourite of mine. I'm definitely team orange when it comes to Veg1. So if you'd like to know more and you're interested in picking up your 6 month supply, head over to thevegansociety.com, search for Veg1, and you can pick up some right there, delivered straight to your door. Enjoy the episode.
Well, my health brought me here. I had issues, I want to say probably about 12 years ago. I started having episodes of gout. I don't know do you know what gout is?
Yeah,
it's an acute arthritis in your toe. And I was getting attacks pretty frequently, and I never realized that it was actually it was actually an ailment. I thought I had injured myself. Right. At that time, I was doing a lot of exercise. I was wrestling, I was running a lot, and I figured I stubbed my toe in a competition or something. And the pain just got stronger and bigger and stronger and longer. And at one point I made an appointment with my doctor. But here in the States, when you make an appointment with your doctor, you have to wait like 2 weeks to see him. So we have all these immediate care facilities sprinkled all over the towns. So I went to one of these urgent care places, and I met a doctor that changed my life. And you know what? And the irony of it is, I don't remember her name. I can see her face. I can see every detail of her face, but I can't remember her name. And I went there and I showed her my toe, and I told her I was in excruciating pain, because I don't know if you've ever had gout. Gout is, it's intense. It's like having a mechanical bulldog like bite your foot and like hold on to it for hours. It's agonizing, and there is no like soft beginning. It's immediate pain until it ends. And it ends like hours later. So anyway, I went to the doctor, and she took one look at my foot, and she said, look, I'm not going to give you a blood test. I can tell that you have gout. I've seen it so much that it's obvious to me that you have gout. And she said something to me that no doctor ever said to me before or since. She's told me, she said, look, this is, I can give you medicine that will solve your gout problem. It'll take away your symptoms. You won't feel anything. But it's not treating the underlying condition. And the underlying condition was heart disease. So she said to me that there's 3 sister ailments that are genetically connected that you get from your parents. She said gout is one of them, kidney stones, and prostate issues, if you're a male, obviously. And what's funny is my father suffered from his prostate all his life. I had already passed the kidney stone, and now I had gout. So I was like, okay, I have these canaries in the coal mine, so to speak, symptoms of heart disease. And she said, look, if you don't change the way you are living, you're going to have to consider at some point a vegan lifestyle or a vegetarian lifestyle, because this isn't going to go away. It's a genetic, I think she used the word trigger. It's almost like your body is letting you know that what you're doing to it food-wise is not working out for it. And that's how I got into it. And I didn't just take her word for it. I began to research, and I saw in your bio that you saw a documentary that changed your life, which was, I think, Cow Conspiracy or whatever. I've seen that one too. The one that I saw that really put it all into focus was Forks Over Knives. I don't know if you've seen that one.
Yeah.
That one really, as soon as when I spoke to her and then I saw that documentary, it kind of all became very obvious to me that I was doing this to myself. So, I'm not the kind of person that ignores reality. I mean, I like to confront it. I think that's the better way to do it. I mean, I don't want to ignore an illness and then find out later, 10 years later, that it's too late to do anything.
Yeah.
So I began to, research and figure out, what I had to do and what was real, what wasn't real. And I actually reached out to a lot of those doctors and researchers in that documentary. I emailed them for their research reports, and I wanted to read it all, even though I didn't understand all of the medical statistics. But you get a gist of what's going on, and it's pretty straightforward. I mean, I was shocked to know 12 years ago that this is all known science. Like, they know that all these foods do this to us. And they allow it because, it's just easier to allow people, I guess, to eat whatever they want and deal with the consequences later. But that was how I got into it. I got into it for my health, and really the most miraculous thing to me was as soon as I committed to it, which wasn't that hard. The hard part is just accepting that you have to move away from the things that you're comfortable with. Yeah. But as soon as you do it and you start doing it, within 30 days, everything was gone. The gout was gone. The cholesterol was gone. Blood pressure came down. Lost a bunch of weight. And I was eating twice as much as I used to eat, which was kind of amazing, right? And that's how I got into it. And then I just started refining it. My biggest issue was the food that I was eating. I couldn't find anything that was specific to my culture. Like there are no Cuban vegan cookbooks, especially when I was looking for them 12 years ago. So I experimented with Indian food because there's a lot of vegetarian, vegan meals in Indian food, and all the kale, slash shake cookbooks that are out there, and I couldn't find anything that I liked really. I mean, for me, food is a very important thing. I mean, I'm Cuban, and Hispanic people in general have a connection to food that I think lots of people don't have. I mean, Italians have it, right? Because they live around their pastas, and it's a big deal to eat in Italy. It's the same thing with Cubans. And that was where I started to realize that I'm going to have to do this myself, because there is no playbook. There's no book of food that comes from my culture that's vegan. And that's how I kind of fell into it. I just started writing these recipes that I already had. I had my grandmother's recipes from Cuba. These are all delicious recipes that involve the worst combinations possible. Lard and pork and beef and all these things. And I was like, I don't want to walk away from this, because I have memories that are tied to all this food, and holidays rotate around these foods. And, I have a big family. We're all Cuban. It's kind of hard to separate yourself from that. So I just decided to figure out a way to make that food better, healthier rather, vegan, vegetarian. And that's how I got here.
Yeah, what an incredible journey. How much had to change? Going back to that point where you spoke to that doctor and you walked away from that doctor's office, you started doing your research. How much had to change in your lifestyle at that point? What did a kind of a typical day look like? Was it kind of meat regularly 3 times a day? What was the sort of
I had animal products in my diet from morning till nighttime. You don't realize it until you start breaking it down, like coffee with milk, a cream cheese and a bagel. That's all animal products. Those are all things that I was accustomed to in the morning. Lunch was always a mini dinner that I would bring to work with me, which was always some type of meat product, whether it was chicken or, fish was the healthy day. But at the end of the day, it's all the same, At night, it was the same, and more of the same. Ham, pork, chicken, fried chicken, any form of chicken, because, over here, I don't know about the UK, but over here, everyone thinks that chicken is much more healthy than red meat or fish, and they don't realize that it's all basically the same. I didn't realize that either until I started actually trying and realizing that, well, if I eat fish, I still have high cholesterol somehow. So I had to start taking that out. And at the end of the day, I had to just stop everything that I was doing and re-educate myself and re-educate my palate on how to eat foods and prepare foods that I would like and my family would like that was vegan. And I would say the first few months it's hard because you're not really sure. And back then, 12 years ago wasn't that long ago, but there was no meat products. There was no vegan meat products. Rather, there was no Impossible Burger. There was none of those things that you can substitute. So I had to figure out, from the ground up how to cook these things, how to make seitan, what kind of soy products are out there that can imitate chicken or whatever. And then you start figuring it out, and then you start to realize the thing that I realized, which I think if most people understood, they'd all be vegetarian or vegan. The protein that you're eating, the animal product, doesn't taste like anything. It tastes like what you season it to be, right? It's the rosemaries, the oreganos, the salt and pepper. All that is the flavor that you taste. And you can do that with any, plant-based protein. Now, I'm not going to tell you it comes out exactly the same because it's not the same thing, but it's close enough not to care. And that's what I discovered. And I started making these traditional Cuban recipes for my family. I experimented on them first. I have an aunt on my father's side that's like the authority on Cuban cooking. So anytime that I would create something, I'd be like, why don't you try this and see if you like it? And you know what? She was honest. I mean, some things she thought were right on target, and some things she was like, it's off a little bit. You got to figure out a way to make it taste this way. And little by little, massaging the recipes and the proportions, I think I came pretty close to an authentic, traditional cookbook that has no meat in it, no animal products.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about Cuban cooking kind of growing up. You mentioned, obviously food being such a central hub to the family, this important kind of role that it played. What is it? What is kind of traditional Cuban food that you kind of grew up eating? What does it consist of? Give us a couple of examples of the dishes.
Well, there's a lot, and all of it's really good. I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm bragging, but Cuban cooking is, I think it's been lost to an extent because all the people from that island have moved away, and whatever's left isn't close to what used to be there. So Cuban cooking is it's a collection of different cultures. It's part Spanish from Spain, okay, but and those were the colonizers that came and colonized Cuba. Now, those Spanish folks that came from Europe to Cuba had Arabic influence in their food from when the Moors took over, up to southern Spain, right? They took most of Europe and the Mediterranean there. So there's the influence of that in the cooking. And then there's, of course, Cuba was central to the triangular trade, if you remember your history, right? With the slaves and the sugarcane and everything. So we have the influence of the black slaves. And there was an enormous Chinese population that came to Cuba as well to work back during all that time. So you have the influences of the Spaniards from Europe, the slaves that worked in Cuba, and the Chinese. And it all comes together to make this really unique flavor that I don't think you really see too much anywhere anymore. So a typical dish, something as simple as meat and potatoes, which is an actual dish, is really an amazing recipe. It comes out, it's far beyond meat and potatoes. I mean, there's wine in it, there's peppers, there's what's called sofrito, which is the foundation of the dish. And then everything comes together. It boils into this beautiful sauce with meat and potatoes in it. And I don't know if you remember, Ernest Hemingway kind of immortalized that dish in his book, The Old Man of the Sea. Because when the old man came off of his fishing trip, the first thing he asked for was a plate of meat of carne con papas, which is meat and potatoes. So for us, all these dishes, they kind of connect all Cubans together. I mean, we all eat the same thing. And what's interesting is every family has a different twist to how they do things. So you get variations of meat and potatoes. You get variations of, ropa vieja, which is another meat dish, variations of rice and beans. When I say rice and beans to Americans here, they don't realize that I'm talking about really sophisticated recipes to make that taste like something else. They just think it's beans with rice, and that's not it at all. Same thing with arroz con pollo, rice with chicken. I mean, I say that's one of my favorite dishes. Arroz con pollo is far beyond rice with chicken. there's beer in it, there's garlic, there's saffron, there's all these ingredients that come together to make this beautiful mix of food that you haven't had. If you've never tried Cuban food, you've never had these dishes. And I'm telling you, some of them are very delicate, some of them are very hearty. They're consistently delicious. Cuban food is kind of like sauce-based kind of food. So the meat that you use doesn't really matter. Like, there are no good cuts of beef in Cuban cooking. There's the cheapest thing you can buy, you make it soft, and then you mix it with delicious sauce and you serve it with rice. That's usually how it all works. And that actually comes from the Chinese influence that is in the food. Because Chinese food is similar. It's very saucy food, and there's no emphasis on the actual cuts of meat. It's just meat in the sauce with rice. It's very similar to Cuban food. Obviously distinctly different in taste, but I guess in mechanics is what I'm referring to. And all these things mean different things to Cuban people. I would say the major meals, like Christmas, is usually celebrated on the 24th. Most Latin people celebrate Christmas on the 24th. And that's a giant meal that every Cuban family, well, I shouldn't say every Cuban family, I would say most Cuban families have. It's usually roast pork, rice and beans, a potato dish it's not potato, it's called yuca. It's a root vegetable similar to potato. And what is, I don't know if it's unique to Cubans, but what used to happen in my household was my grandmother's family was so big that she had all these sisters that were pretty amazing cooks too. So everybody brought what they made really well. And then you had this enormous feast of food that was amazing. Like, it was so amazing. And I don't want to come across as like some kind of like I'm better than other people because of our food. But it was so amazing. Like, when I went to a friend's house as a teenager and I saw what they had like for dinner, I would be like, this is impossible. This can't be dinner, because dinner is much better than this in my house, But those are the things that you start to realize when you're from a different culture that has that kind of emphasis, that priority on food. You see the difference. I'm sure Italian people see it too. I'm sure an Italian that goes over to somebody else's house that eats food out of, and I'm not knocking it, if that's what you can do. If you have frozen dinners at your house and that's how you live, that's your thing. But I'm sure that Italian people that come from that kind of culture, you feed them a boxed dinner and they'll be like, this is kind of different than what I grew up with, And that's kind of the importance. That's how it all ties us together. And I think a lot of it has to do, I think the importance of food for us, and I can't speak for everybody, but I can speak for the Cubans, the households that I know. A lot of things were lost when Castro took over and put Cuba under communist rule. And a lot of those memories of Cuba that they had in their mind, a lot of it rotated around the food and the festivals and everything. And I think that when they brought that back from Cuba to, in my case, to New York, it was very important for the family to keep that connection to the island. And I think that's shared amongst Cuban families. I've had conversations with other Cuban people, and it's the same thing. Like, they all have a special dish, they all have a special celebration, and all of it. It's you never hear of any. I never hear of any Cuban family catering, calling a caterer to make different food for a party. It's Cuban food. That's it. And that's the background I come from, and I'm happy about it, because it's a culture of family. Like, we all sat around the dinner table together at the same hour, no matter what. You had to come in and eat together, whether you wanted to or not. There was no hours of video game playing. There was no, at 6 o'clock is when everyone sat down, and my grandmother would make this meal. Now, I understand that not everybody has a grandmother, a full-time grandmother that cooks everything, but that's what I had, and I appreciate it, and I want to emulate that with my family. And that's, everyone has their own culture, right? I'm sure you have traditions that you keep that are important. I'm sure English people have a deep culture of food and music and all the things that tie you guys together. It's very similar in our culture.
I think, talking about that, whilst there are many cultural things, from my experience, I come from a part English, part Indian background, and so some of what you're talking about there, I absolutely relate to. That kind of the matriarch grandmother kind of figure, cooking for the whole family. My mum's many brothers and sisters bringing over dishes. It really brought back, as you were talking about it then, brought back memories of being young and going to my grandmother's house. But I do notice kind of over the course of time, as modern culture's kind of kicked in, as some of that has been eroded. Perhaps it happens a bit less frequently, that kind of thing. Life getting in the way, life getting busier. What's your experience like in kind of the families that the kind of Cuban communities? Is that those traditions, are they still quite alive there?
They are. The timing is off, though. That's what it is. So since everybody works so much here in the United States, even though you may want to have dinner at 6, doesn't always happen at 6. In my house, dinner's always made, and whenever you show up to eat it, you eat it. I mean,
right.
So it's understood that in my house, like my oldest son, he's from a previous marriage, so his mother and I are divorced. But he comes to my house, and his mother is not Cuban, so she's of a different culture. So when he comes over to my house to visit, he's like, when I come to your house, there's always food in the refrigerator. And that's because I cook all the time, because I think it's important to have a refrigerator full of food. And not just food that, anyone can buy a roasted chicken at the supermarket and prepared foods. To me, that's okay. That's better than nothing. But I think it's more important when, someone dedicates themselves to taking care of the family. That's how I feel when I cook. I feel like I'm trying to do the best possible thing I can to show my children that it's important to learn how to cook for many reasons. It's important to learn how to cook because it's economically better. You can control the ingredients that you put in there. You can cook it on the spot. You're not worried about it being frozen or other people handling it. All these things matter. And when you come to my house, the pots of food that are in the refrigerator are for everybody. So you just come in. If you bring, like my son will come over with a buddy of his occasionally on the weekends, and his buddy is amazed at all the food that's in the refrigerator as well. And they feast. I come out I go to bed probably about 11. These kids are up until 3 a.m. playing video games. And if I come out into the living room at 3 a.m, they'll be sitting there eating whatever's left of arroz con pollo or whatever's there. They just devour it. And it makes me happy because it's kind of like the security of youth. Like when you're a kid, everything is taken care of for you. There's nothing you have to worry about. And I think food is part of that. I think it's sad that there are families out there that don't have refrigerators full of food. I think it makes you grow up different. And I think that it's valuable. I think it's something that people should do. People should practice because it makes your family stronger. It makes your marriage stronger. It makes your bond with your kids stronger. And all of those aren't bad things. And it's as simple as just making a pot of rice and beans.
That's incredible. Really, I'm fascinated by the you coming back home to your family who steeped in all of this tradition and culture around food, and you saying to them, "I'm going vegan." What was that moment like? How supportive was everybody? Was everybody a bit perplexed? Were they used to the idea of veganism? Where was everybody at?
That's a testament to my diligence, because it was not well received. The only one that turned vegan with me was my wife, because she knew that it was important to me. But I don't think that she was enthusiastic about it. And it's certainly in the beginning, when we were still trying to figure out what to eat. And that's the other problem. There's so many options out there that you don't know what to do. So I started experimenting with Indian food. It's funny you mentioned that, because I was thinking when you said that, I'm like, I had a lot of Indian food trying to figure out if I really like Indian food that much for the rest of my life, And we were doing this, and then I decided to take out my grandmother's recipes, and I decided to see what I can make. And the first recipes that I made didn't have any of this, processed vegan meat in it. It had basically vegetables, whatever I can substitute for the meat, what I thought would work. And I remember I made it. The first dish I made for my aunt. And my aunt, she's the sister of my father, so she's the only aunt I have on that side of the family. And she's, she's a wonderful lady. And I love her to pieces, but she doesn't hold back. Like, if something's not good, she'll tell you. And that's the reason why I did that. So the first few ones that I made was not well received. And then I made one thing, a dish called picadillo. Picadillo is like a ground beef, okay? And it's made in a sauce, and it's really delicious. But what I did was I substituted the ground beef for cauliflower. I granulated cauliflower and I browned it. So when I made it, it didn't look like it was cauliflower. It looked like it was meat. And she ate it, and her eyes lit up, and she said, "Well, I thought you were going to make me something vegan." I said, "Well, I did. This is cauliflower." And right there I knew that I was onto something, because she liked it. Now, my father's the kind of guy that doesn't give a compliment easy. He's not a mean person. He's just not that kind of guy. Like, he's more the kind of guy that'll make a joke at your expense. Hopefully you'll laugh at the joke with him. That's the kind of person he is. So when I made him my first version of carne con papas, which is it's one of his favorite dishes, I made it for him using zucchini. And I took a chance with the zucchini because I wasn't really, I didn't have a handle on zucchini, right? So I made this carne con papas, and I substituted the meat with zucchini. And I told him, I said, "Look, this has no meat in it. So, fire away. If you don't like something, let me know. I want to know exactly what you think." And he was eating it, and he was eating it, with some zest. He was enjoying it. Mm-hmm. And he looked at me, he said, "You can sell this." And I was like, "Oh, get out of here." And, that was a big compliment coming from my father, because this is a hardcore 80-year-old traditional Cuban that still smokes 2 packs a day. He still thinks he's in Cuba riding horses. I mean, that's how traditional he is. Mm. And he liked it. So I was like, okay. So I have the ability here to successfully change my diet. And that's what I did. I just started picking recipes that I thought I could imitate. And now I cook for them on the weekends. Every weekend, not every weekend, I'd say probably once a month, my aunt comes over. Now that's the funny thing. She was so inspired by what I was doing that she became vegan. And this is like a 64-year-old woman at the time. She'd kill me if she knew I was telling her age publicly like this. But
hopefully she's not a podcast listener.
Yeah, just edit that part out. So, and I remember her telling me that she was on cholesterol medicine, and the cholesterol medicine has side effects that she wasn't enjoying. They were hurting her joints. She was always uncomfortable. And I said, "Look, I'm working on this. Yeah, you've already had a couple of recipes. She's an amazing cook herself. So why don't you try? Just take it out of your diet and see what happens." And the same thing happened to her. Within 30 days, her cholesterol dropped 100 points. She was so happy.
Wow.
But she didn't know. See, that's the thing. People don't know. You think that cholesterol, like, she always thought, she was under the impression that she just, she's just the kind of person that has high cholesterol. She never realized that it was what she's putting in her mouth. And the minute she took it away, and the minute she realized that she didn't need to take that medicine anymore because her cholesterol just dropped because she wasn't consuming it anymore, she was the happiest person in the world. I mean, when she goes to the doctor now, she calls me up and she's like, for like the 10th time now, "I can't believe the doctor tells me that my cholesterol's fine." And every single time the doctor asks her, "Are you taking too much of the medicine or something?" She's like, no, I'm not taking any medicine. I gave that up. And the doctor never even remembers that she became a vegan. It's always a surprise to him. "You're doing so great. What are you doing?" She's like, "I told you like 100 times. I don't need animal products anymore." So, these results are real. These things are real. And I think a lot of the reason why there aren't more people who are vegans or vegetarians is because they just don't know. They don't make the connection. And everything is presented here. I mean, I can't speak for Europe or the UK, but in the United States, everything is presented as a pill, or like a one thing that'll change your life. And that's what people do because they're lazy. They don't realize that, all you have to do is just change what you're doing. And I'm convinced that, at this point, 98% of all the disease that's out there is related to your lifestyle. And you don't make these connections because no one makes them for you until you start looking. Like, for the longest time, it was okay to smoke, right? Smoking cigarettes was fine, and they would try to justify it and say, well, not everybody dies of lung cancer, so it's okay. Or, so-and-so's 98 years old and smokes 10 packs of cigarettes a day. But in reality, what you're doing is you're taking, something that's foreign to your body, putting it into your body and making your body consume it. And then your body naturally makes cancer. That's just, now how it becomes smoke to cancer, I'm not a doctor. But the reality of it is you have a good chance because that foreign thing is in your body. And when you start looking at food that way, when you start to realize that, maybe you're not supposed to eat animals. Maybe there's no benefit to eating animals. Then you start to realize that there are no sick vegans or vegetarians in the hospital with heart disease or with all the cancers that you read about. You start to connect dots. You start to realize that, it has to be the food. And that's where Forks Over Knives really opened my eyes because they had a cancer study that I think was done in India where they realized that if you ate plant protein, the cells didn't become cancerous. And the minute you swap the plant protein for the animal protein, they started triggering cancer in cells. I mean, that to me blew my mind. That should be common knowledge. They should tell you that, these things can bother you. Instead of saying, everything in moderation is fine. That sentence right there implies that what you're eating is bad for you, right? Because if it was good for you, why would you have to eat it in moderation? Right? So all of it's brainwashing, and it's not intentional. It's just, your parents were fed the food that their parents fed them. And, these cultures don't realize that you're not supposed to eat that stuff. And that's how you get populations of people that have specific cancers or specific ailments. And no one catches on until, even when they do studies, no one wants to believe it. Or there's always conflicting reports. Well, it's not always the case like that. No, it's not always the case, but it's mostly the cases, Yeah. And people don't want to embrace it. Like, I have friends that eat my food, and they go, I can eat this every day. And then the next day, they don't eat it anymore. All of that for the sake of a hamburger or a hot dog, all this disease, all this worry.
This episode of the Bloody Vegans podcast is brought to you by Veg One and the good folks over at the Vegan Society. Veg One is the multivitamin and mineral supplement designed by vegans for vegans. It was introduced back in 2005, updated in 2021 with an incredible new plastic-free package, and contains all of those key vitamins and minerals that everyone will tell you when you transition into a plant-based diet, into a vegan lifestyle, that you need to think about, and you absolutely do. So, what's in there? You've got B2, B6, B12, D3, iodine, selenium, and folic acid. So all of those kind of key ones you need to consider when you're starting out, or perhaps you've been here for some time. And it's all in a convenient once a day chewable form, which is super helpful, right? It's just £12.70 for 6 months worth, and they come in two amazing flavours. You've got orange and you've also got blackcurrant. Orange is a personal favourite of mine. I'm definitely team orange when it comes to Veg One. So if you'd like to know more and you're interested in picking up your 6 month supply, head over to thevegansociety.com, search for Veg One, and you can pick up some right there, delivered straight to your door. Let's turn to the book. Like, I've got a copy here. It's incredible. It's an incredible book. It just really opened my eyes up to a completely different culture of food. I thought it was, it's amazing that it's out in the world. And as we talked about before we started recording, great to see it over here in the UK too. Tell me a little bit about the journey of coming up with the book. What got you from the place of your dad saying, do you know what, I think you could sell this, to let's put these recipes in a book? What was that process like?
Well, my intention was never to write a book. Okay, my intention was just to convert the recipes that I grew up with into food that I can eat. And as I did that, almost every recipe in my cookbook gives me a memory of a family member or of an event. And I started thinking, I'm like, I should probably write this stuff down. Like, the first time I tried this, or the person that brought the recipe to my house, the first time I had it was my Aunt Josephine. And I started thinking, I'm like, I should probably just write this down as a short little story about how I came to it. So, just so I can remember, and if my kids are interested in knowing who these people are, it'll be there written down somewhere. And then I started to realize that I really miss these people. So as I was writing it, I was like, I should probably write a book. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotional as I'm thinking about all these folks. I should probably write a book just so I can memorialize all these wonderful memories that I have with all these wonderful family members that I have. So that's how it started. So I just, I would pick a recipe, and I would think to myself, how many times have I had this? Where have I had it? And where did it mean something to me? And it all came down to my grandmother and her sisters. So I just started writing this down, and then I was like, you know what? I should probably, if I'm going to do all this writing, I should probably write how they came to the country and what happened and their history. Because, it's fascinating to me, but I've heard it a million times, and I don't think people understand the struggles that you go through. Like, all these folks in my family were displaced overnight. It just happened within weeks of another political agenda being done in their country. They had to flee, and they had to leave everything. Properties, cars, their whole life. Can you imagine being uprooted immediately, having to run because you're afraid of what may happen to the future of your kids, leaving a country, ending up in another country where you don't speak the language. I think my grandfather was my age when he got to the United States. I'm 50. So can you imagine, like, at 50, after you've been successful, you have to immediately run, start over again, and somehow make it. It's a testament to all the immigrants. Not just my family. Yeah. There are people of lesser means that show up with like $20 in their pocket, and they have to figure out a way to do it. So, I started thinking about, I was a kid when I witnessed all this. I was a child, so it never really registered how deep a trauma it was until I was older, until I started really thinking about it, until I started realizing that, you can have all your stuff taken from you, including family. And I think those stories have to be told, even if they're, even if they're not perfect stories, even if they're not nice stories. I think they have to be told to an extent so that people understand that, we all share and struggle, and the struggles are all very, very close. And for my situation and for my family, the thing that kept everyone together was the food. And to me, it was very important. So what I ended up doing was I just made these stories about the dishes and how I remember them and where I was and how they're presented. And it was kind of like therapy for me. And before I knew it, 5 years had rolled by. And I had a couple hundred pages worth of writing. So then I just started to organize it, and I have a knack for writing. I can't say that I've always written stories, but communication comes easy to me. So I just organized it. I saw a couple of other cookbooks that I admired, so I kind of shaped mine to look like that format. And then I copyrighted it, and I published it. And I didn't think, I didn't publish it going, I'm going to sell 1 million copies. This is it. I just published it just to see what happened. I put it out there. And, immediately my family bought it. I expected that. So I had some sales in October and blah, blah, blah. And then I started to realize that the book kept selling. And I'm like, well, I'm out of family members. So it can't still be the
Somebody's
family.
buying it.
And then, and here we are. The first year, this is a year and a few months now, I've sold more books than I ever thought I would sell. And it's amazing. Like, you're in the UK right now, thousands of miles away, and you have my book in your hand. I mean, to me, that is never going to get old. I mean, that is amazing. Someone bought my book in Germany. And I was telling my wife, I'm like, someone in Germany has my book. It's just so crazy to me. It's flattering. It's very flattering that, that's happened. And it's amazing to me. Like, here I am speaking to you about something that I did with no intentions of any of this unfolding. Like, it was supposed to be a private thing. I mean, I did publish it, I guess, because I wanted to see my grandmother's face out there. Like, I wanted to memorialize her. And now it's kind of blossomed into this little book, and it's, been well received. And, it's funny, I don't want to, I've gotten recognition from people, like other Cubans who are kind of high up on the food chain as far as fame goes. Like, I've been recognized by these folks, and I'm just the guy in New Jersey who wrote a book on my laptop. I didn't expect all of this. And it's humbling, and it's also inspiring. Like, it's amazing. It's amazing how the world can receive you a certain way. Like your podcast. I mean, I'm sure that you didn't expect it to be, in the Netherlands, over here, over there. There's people listening to you that you've never met. I mean, that's an amazing thing, isn't it?
Oh, it really is. Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, I can share to some extent, but the feeling. But yeah, like, I can't imagine what it'd be like putting out such kind of personal recollections, things that really mean so much. It must be just an incredibly powerful thing to be able to share those memories that are so personal, that mean so much with like you say, people all around the world. What an incredible thing to have been able to have done.
Yeah, it's mind blowing. And when you get, I have reviews on my Amazon book. Most of them are positive. Like everything else, there's negative reviews in there. The positive ones are from total strangers. And to me, like, I'm blown away. Like, these are literally the recipes that we would make in the house. Like, I'm not a chef. I'm just a guy that knows how to cook my cuisine. I mean, I would say I'm probably a more experienced cook than most people, because I cook all the time. I've been cooking since I was young. I watched my grandmother cook all my life. So I have a little bit more knowledge than most people, but it's nothing that anyone else couldn't do. I mean, all we're doing is following recipes. So to me, it's amazing when I get a positive review from somebody, and it's clearly sincere. Like, you can hear the sincerity. Yeah, it's really trippy.
I bet. Has the reaction from fellow kind of Cubans around the world, around the US, have you had many folks coming to you sort of saying, this resonates with me on a particularly deep level? Because I could imagine that folks who have lived that culture, who have been part of some of the same kind of similar experiences, they would feel it on a different level to many others. Have you had much of that kind of response?
Yes, I've had that from mostly the older generation. Folks, 60 to 80. I mean,
wow.
I don't know if you read the beginning of my book. It's just basically an introduction into my family and how I arrived at cooking, because I felt the need to kind of like validate where all this is coming from. Like I said, I'm not a chef, so I had to explain to people how this all happened. And the stories that I tell in there, they're not all stories. They're references to things that I was told as a kid. And what's interesting is, I've had older people tell me, what you wrote in that book, some of those things were very real. Some of those things we experienced as well. And it's weird. Like, I didn't live it, so I'm a generation removed from it. And it's nice to know that I was given accurate information by my family. Like, there was no exaggerations. Things were true. And I've gotten really good responses from the older people. The younger people, we all know the stories, but we didn't live them. So, like, as much as I can say how horrible it was, I didn't walk in those shoes. But the people that did walk in the shoes, they tell me it's accurate, and that makes me happy. It should be told. Lots of people went through lots of misery and have had success, and no one ever hears about it. You only hear about the super horrible stories, right? But most people struggle, and the struggle is a real thing,
And like you say, there's when you're a generation or two out, you can perhaps become a bit complacent or take for granted, what life is about, the luxuries that we kind of have now, the things that we're afforded, and our kind of forefathers, our grandmothers, and so on, who kind of fought to give us those. And I think it's just an incredible memoriam of that, if you like, or a mantle to pass to even to younger generation. You've got kids. I've got a very young boy myself, and I think it's important these stories are shared through families. It really is. It kind of, I think it's all about our identity. Who we kind of are on a deep level. It's very important stuff. So more power to you for doing it. I think it's genuinely incredible.
Yeah, no, and you got to remember. I mean, we're all very accustomed to taking the opinions of quote unquote experts or people that you see on TV. But the reality of it is that the people that raised you and love you are always going to tell you the truth, because they have your best interest in mind. So you have to listen to those folks. To me, that's a priority. I want to hear the story from the people who saw me born, because that's where I'm going to get the real story, not all the other things that are out there. People trying to convince you of their agenda, when all you have to do is speak to your parents or speak to your grandparents, and you'll get a good handle on what the world is really like. And that's something that in this country we don't revere. We take our old people and we shove them into nursing homes, and we forget that they're our parents, that they're our aunts, or the people that we grew up with. I would never do that to my loved ones. But it's a cultural thing here. Like, they get old enough and boom, you put them in a place and you forget about them. And that's the source of knowledge that you should be tapping every day. Every question that you have, you should ask your parents, or you should ask your grandparents, because they lived it. Like the Japanese revere older people. It's a great thing. We should adopt that culture, because that's where all of the actual knowledge is. That's where the truth is. And yet we don't, I don't know how that happened, but we don't seem to do it. I think that's a mistake.
I couldn't agree more, Raydel. I think it's an incredible point. It really is. Time's getting away from us, and I want to make sure that we let folks know how to get a hold of a copy of this book, because I think it's a very, very important one. I've spoken to a lot of chefs, a lot of folks who've written cookbooks, and I'd probably venture to say that I've not seen a book with as much personal resonance, with as much of that level of weight to it in terms of its cultural importance. So I think it's vital that folks, if they're in the Vegas bit interested, they go out and get a copy. So where can folks do that?
Amazon.com is where the book is sold, and on my website, which is vegancubano.com. That's VEGAN, vegan, Cubano, CUBANO.com. Those two spots. The book is heavy and all that because I'm not a professional writer. I'm not a chef. I'm just a guy that wrote my experiences down and the food I grew up with, and I cook well. If you're thinking, this is what I tell everybody, okay? Everybody who'll listen, if you're thinking about it and you're not sure, it's because there's a lot of unanswered questions, right? You don't think you're gonna like the food. Yeah. You don't think you're gonna be satisfied by the food. My cookbook, I didn't write it for vegans. I wrote it for people on the fence. So if you want to make that change, if you're looking to better your life, don't take my word for it. Buy the book, or buy any book that will cook vegan food for you, and try it out, and you'll see that you'll live better, and you're not missing a thing. you're not missing a thing. You're compromising your health for the sake of eating things that make you unhealthy. You don't have to anymore. So, I'm pretty sure that if you followed some recipes in my book, you'd be sold and you would do it because it's easy and the food is delicious. And I mean, you may not be Cuban, but at least you have a place like you can have a vegan night and enjoy that food, every single time. Which, I think veganism has turned into something that it shouldn't, okay? I'm not the type of vegan that is obnoxious about it. Okay, I do it for my health. I think it's easier to promote things when you involve your health in it. Like, I would never convince somebody. I don't think you can convince anybody not to eat a cow because the cow feels bad about it. I don't think people care. I think the majority of people don't. It doesn't resonate with them. But if you say, hey, look, you're taking years off your life because you're eating this way. Why not improve your health and make it easy and it can be delicious? And now you're doing two things. You're saving someone's life, or at least that sounds grandiose. You're improving someone's life, and you're saving the potential animal because you've convinced somebody that it's better for their health to eat this way than to eat other things. And that's kind of the basis of the book. Like, if you're not sure, I can show you how to cook it, and you'll be happy with the product. There's no doubt in my mind. I mean, if you follow the recipe, I've made the recipes 1,000,000 times. They're not hard. Even if you screw them up a little bit, even if you don't put enough salt in, it's going to be head and shoulders above anything else that you would make on your own. And you'll be happy with it. And that way you can make the change, And I think it's important. I think agriculturally it's unsustainable with the amount of people that are on the earth. I think this is known science. I mean, the reason why rainforests get cut down is to feed cows so that you can slaughter them and feed the world cows. I mean, with all the food that we use to feed these animals, you can feed the world if you know how to cook well,
Yep.
And that's how I feel about it. I mean, there's always going to be people that are very rigid and won't change, and that's fine. But, if you can capture a couple of people and show them and change them, I think it makes a big difference.
Absolutely, Raydel. Look, thank you so much. Thank you for writing this book. I think it's incredible. Thank you for being here today. I'm sure folks will get so much out of this conversation. I'm going to make sure there's all the links in the show notes as well, so that folks, if they are interested in picking up a copy of the book, find out a little bit more, just go to the show notes. You can give that a click. You can find out a little bit more and pick up a copy.
Thanks so much for having me on your podcast. It's amazing to me. I mean, it's all, I don't take any of it for granted. It's all so amazing to me.
Oh, no. Thank you so much, Raydel. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thank you.
This episode of the Bloody Vegans podcast is brought to you by Veg One from the Vegan Society. Veg One is the nutritional vitamin and mineral supplement designed for vegans by vegans. Launched back in 2005 and rebranded in 2021 with a fantastic new plastic-free package, Veg One provides nutritional support alongside a healthy and balanced vegan diet, all for an affordable price. With a 6-month supply available for just £12.70, Veg One will cost you little over £2 a month and offers EU nutrient reference values, or NRVs, of vitamin B12, D3, iodine, selenium, B2, B6 and folic acid. Veg One is chewable, it's affordable and reliable. You can take it once a day. It's available in fantastic orange and blackcurrant flavours. Super easy and convenient, completely plastic free. So why not head over to vegansociety.com, search for Veg One and take your next healthy steps into the world of veganism.